Zimbabwe cash crisis worse. Talking about Venezuela once again. Systemic important banks. They removed the 1,000 thing right there called monetary Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you today with some more RT News updates. And as you can tell from today's title, we're going to be talking about some moves against the dollar by two allies in Russia and EU, all having to do with sanctions, as well as the idea that the United States of America is really putting pressure on a lot of trading partners that Russia and the EU both deal with. And so they themselves are looking possibly in the very near future to begin trading in their own currencies amongst one another, which ultimately will lead to more bypassing of the dollar, aka the whole de-dollarization process. But before I dive into today's articles, as always, if you're new to RTD, I want to encourage you to click the subscribe button along with the notification tab to be informed of future updates as well as live streams. Also join me on Twitter, where I share posts throughout the day on various subject matters dealing with our monetary system, as well as whatever's happening in the news that I can't get to via video. Make sure you click the button down below to be notified when things are posted. So today I have a few articles I want to share with you, all dealing with what's happening with Russia and EU and how they are beginning to really rethink the whole process of utilizing the dollar amongst themselves for trade. And in the articles I want to share with you, it kind of hints at the fact that pretty soon, possibly by the end of this year, there might be some official deals worked out where the EU and Russia decide to use the euro as well as the ruble in trade amongst one another, kind of bypassing the whole dollar situation, especially now that the United States of America looks to be removing themselves from the Iranian deal. Not only in weeks past have I commented on how EU has mentioned about coming up with their own possible payment method in order to continue to do business with Iran. And so now we have the idea that from this article, as you're going to see here, it says, Russia ready to ditch dollar in favor of euro in foreign trade, the finance minister says. So give you an idea what's going on here. And as always, scroll down below to find out more for yourself. And I also want to give credit to one of the viewers for sending me this article via Facebook, so thank you for that. It says, settlements in the U.S. currency could be dropped by Russia in favor of the euro if the EU takes a stand against the latest U.S. sanctions on Moscow, the finance minister said at St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum. He's quoted as saying, as we see, restrictions imposed by the American partners are of extraterritorial nature. The possibility of switching from the U.S. dollar to the euro in settlements depend on Europe's stance towards Washington's position. Says the EU initially supported Washington's sanctions against Moscow, but has recently criticized U.S. President Donald Trump's policy of imposing trade restrictions on other countries. The EU was also hit by the introduction of the U.S. import duties on steel and aluminum. Says the situation escalated even more after the U.S. withdrew from the nuclear deal with Iran. What really stood out to me is said imposing trade restrictions on other countries. So it's all fine and good for the EU to go along with the United States of America imposing sanctions on Russia throughout the last couple of years, because it didn't really pose much of a threat outside of Russia's deliverance of gas through the Eastern European countries. But now it seems like the United States of America might have overstepped our bounds just a little bit by imposing more sanctions on different countries that also impact the European economy. And so from this article here, it looks like the finance minister is putting it in the hands of the EU to make a decision, basically saying that if you guys are willing to stand up to the United States of America, then we'll be willing to work with you as far as doing some bilateral trades amongst ourselves. And so we'll see in the days ahead how this plays out.
It's the next recession.
Recession will be.
Will be a recession.
We're going to hit a recession.
The date of the next recession.
A U.S.-only recession typically lasts 8 to 10 months, but a lot of things about this particular one have not been typical. So
a crash is coming. Now, whether it's 6 months from now, 12 months, 36 months, no one knows.
I go to bed every night, I dream of another recession. If you know what to do, if you have the right plan to set up, you can make a lot of money from this.
Next article here says, which countries are dumping the dollar and why? And so this one also came out a couple days ago. It says the European Union is considering switching payments from the U.S. dollar to the euro after Washington threatened to target European firms working in Iran. So basically, instead of the EU using dollars to do business with other countries, they're saying, why don't we just switch and use our own currency? Says the measure may help the EU to retain one of the world's largest markets, which is open for trade after the historic nuclear deal signed by Tehran and the P5+1 powers, which is China, France, Russia, UK, US, plus Germany in 2015. In light of the recent developments, Iran is the most pressured nation to drop the dollar, with Tehran having partially adjusted trade without U.S. currency. Experts are unanimous on the point that bi and multilateral pacts between various nations could become the major drivers on the way toward decreasing the dependence on the U.S. currency in international trade. So basically, more countries beginning to work with each other, settling amongst themselves, or an agreed upon international medium of exchange other than dollars. Scroll down a little bit more. It says the U.S. dollar is still, for many reasons, the international and reserve currency of choice, according to Katab, the gentleman comment here, says the whole international financial system is currently structured around the United States and around the central role of the dollar, end quote. It says, however, the expert noted that the international system will change dramatically. Rapid development of blockchain technology along with rooting of virtual currencies is reportedly set to bring about the changing process. So here we have a financial gentleman mentioning about how, as of now, the dollar is still the primary currency being used just because it's so plentiful. But yet, as he says here, with the blockchain as well as the introduction of virtual currencies, it's just a matter of time before more countries begin to do bi and trilateral agreements, as it mentioned here. And so that plays into the very next article, which I want to share with you, which is from a former guest here on RTD, and it's Jim Rogers, and it has to do with our debt and why we're able to continue to do the things that we're doing, because currently we are the reserve currency, but yet too much debt always has a way of spoiling the party. And so this article here talks about that debt and how Jim Rogers really believes that that will be the reason why one day we ourselves will no longer have the current reserve currency of the world. So it says U.S. has the largest debt in world history, dollar to lose status as #1 currency, says Jim Rogers. And so for those that are not familiar, if you go to the RTD University page, you'll get a chance to see he's number 50, the gentleman right here above my head. We had a very good talk, and it's called "The Dollar is Going to Have a Lot of Problems." So I advise you to take a minute and find out more about Mr. Rogers. But give you an idea here, it says the U.S. dollar is becoming less appealing for investors as American debt continues to soar and the greenback is printed to cover it. Investor Jim Rogers said at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which is the same place the finance minister of Russia was speaking, says American currency will lose the status of the main reserve currency much sooner than 2030, Rogers said. The dollar, quote, is going to be higher than now because the turmoil is coming. Then it is going to be overpriced and people will look around and say, America's got the largest debt in the history of the world. It's printing money as fast as it can, the investor said. Says people will look at what Brazil, Russia, China, India, Iran, and other developing countries are doing, Rogers said. Says, quote, they are forming a competing currency right now, he added. So the dollar alternative will come from the countries that have been bossed by the USA. They don't like it, but have enough power to do something about it. So there you have it, the idea that not only Russia and the EU talking amongst themselves on how to bypass the dollar, then we have a American-born investor here who currently lives in Asia mentioning how the U.S. dollar will not be the reserve currency for much longer. Why is that? Because the very countries that the United States of America is bossing around with all these sanctions, they're being forced to come up with alternatives on their own if they want to continue to do business on an international scene, which means that they are forced to begin working with each other, which is basically isolating us, which is putting us in a very bad position. Because one of the things this country has become very good at is borrowing and creating out of thin air, which is what he's talking about in this article here. So just imagine more countries begin to dump the dollar and no one wants to buy our bonds. Then that means the Federal Reserve will be the last ones left to purchase those things, which is basically saying you have a private company purchasing our debt, basically monetizing it. And so the monetary supply will continue to increase, and that will hurt our purchasing power even more. And so in the end, there's no bright future for the Federal Reserve note, aka the dollar. So it's very interesting as more countries begin to dump the dollar. This type of stuff you will not hear on the mainstream news, but yet RT is a Russian-sponsored media company. So it's a good way of getting an alternative spin on what's happening in the world. So other than that, hope all is well. I would love to hear your thoughts on this whole de-dollarization process. Do you think it's possible that the EU and Russia will begin implementing some type of bilateral trade amongst themselves in the form of some currency swap perhaps this year or in the years ahead? I would love to find out. Leave a comment down below. Other than that, enjoy your day.